right, welcome to the Franchise Secrets Podcast with your host, Eric Van Horn, and today's guest is Zack Fishman. We met on the slopes in Park City last winter and struck up a friendship ever since, and he's a co-host of a podcast as well with his buddy Ryan Hicks. So I want to dive into the other podcast and franchising. He did a massive tour this summer. Fishman, part of Fishman PR. And I think he's got the pulse on kind of the what's up and coming in franchising in terms of young franchisors, young franchisees. And so, Zack, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you. Really appreciate it, buddy. This is it's weird because I've always been thinking, doing a press tour is strange when I guess that you are technically press. So it is always really funny to go on other people's podcasts and see how they do it. And I'm liking this so far. So appreciate the time. This will be good.
Well, good. We'll have to grade it at the end. So let's, why don't we start with some context of like who you are in terms of just like how you grew up in franchising and kind of where you are today. And then I want to go into like, I don't know how many people you guys interviewed, but I want to go into the podcast tour that you did, but give the audience some context on who is Zack Fishman.
Sure. I have been involved in franchising really for as long as I can remember. For those who may not know, it is not a coincidence that I'm talking to all these people and my last name is what it is. My parents run Fishman Public Relations, as Eric kind of talked about before, and I just recently, about a month ago, went back to go work for them. So my family's been involved in the franchise space, and I won't say when, but at some point in the 80s, Sherry Fishman, my mom, got involved in the space, and then they went on to start their own firm in 1991, and my father joined a year later. And so they've been going at it for about 28 years in the franchise space under the banner of Fishman PR. And so, I really started interning when I was, I don't even know if I should announce it because the age is probably not super legal, but, I wasn't being paid, I promise, but it wasn't indentured servitude. But, I was involved in things from a very early age. I interned before I got involved in franchising from a full-time standpoint at the IFA, for Shelly Sun at Bright Star. I was doing some work for Lane Fisher and for Fran Connect and, all of these people across the space. And so I really got a diverse background, and I have tons of mentors in franchising, and that really kind of helped me through my first two stops before Fishman. I started out my career for about a year at a company called Yodel, and then I really spread my wings at a small little startup called Fran Funnel, which is actually not so small anymore. I was responsible for all the sales for that company, and really. Shout out to Eli Robinson and Eli Rosenthal, who played a really large part in me being where I am today and really helping me grow that business to where it's at now, where it's consistently talked about at all conferences, which is so cool because I got to play a really large part in that at a really young age. And now I'm the director of innovation at Fishman Public Relations. So my main role is primarily new business and, I guess innovating, so to speak. So all things operations and trying to bring some stuff into the 21st century. If you've ever tried to explain to your parents how to use certain technology, try doing that when they've owned the business for 28 years. It's always complicated, but it's always good.
Now, so, you've done a lot in franchising since then, and I love like interning, mentoring, and I'm sure you've learned a ton along the way. What are some of the like highlights of your intern/mentoring with different well-known people in the franchise world?
Yeah. So, there's a couple people to call out that I had the opportunity to be with. There's tons, but the ones that I can think of off the bat is I was fortunate enough at a very early age to work for, one of the most unbelievable women. Really in general, but in franchising in particular, if we're talking about that scope, and Shelly Sun, I think that she really has taught me a ton, and she's she's family to me, which was really awesome. And so I had the opportunity to work for her directly. Of course,
for anybody that doesn't know, maybe they're not on the franchisor side, they're on the franchisee side. give them some context on who is Shelly Sun.
So Shelly Sun's the CEO of a company called Bright Star Care. They have about 335 units, I believe. Don't quote me, Shelly, sorry, but I think it's 335 units. They were really one of the pioneers in the senior home healthcare business. They are, I mean, to be perfectly honest with you, probably one of the leaders in the space. And Shelly was the former chairwoman of the IFA, and she's very, very involved in multiple aspects of it, ranging from the political action committee, FranPac, that the franchise world kind of donates money to help fight all the stuff going on in Congress. And in addition to that, she is very much involved in mentorship for younger folks in the franchise space. I'm counting myself included in that. And she really is, she has become family to me because she lives in the Chicagoland area, just like my family does. So I grew up around her, which was always great.
So, who else? So Shelly, obviously, I mean, it's cool that she likes to, it sounds like she's still doing it with people, mentoring and helping people.
Yeah. Yeah, she really is. And,
Is it all formal or is it informal?
It's mostly informal. I mean, with her, she is such a busy person, and she's on the go more than almost any person that I know, but she's always willing to take the time. I mean, Catherine Monson's another one who I've had a lot of opportunities to spend lots of time with. She's the CEO of Fast Signs, another really amazing woman in general, but also in the franchise space in particular. Both very, very close friends with my mother, Sherry. So I've had that opportunity, which is always great. Another person who I've spent tons of time with is the former CEO of Postnet and of Best Life Brands, Steve Greenbaum, who that is somebody that I can call at the drop of a hat, and he's probably one of the most knowledgeable people that I know. And it's incredibly informal. I can call him at 1 a.m, and even if he doesn't pick up immediately, he'll always call me back and talk to me. He knows what it's like to work in a family business, so it's especially important for me right now because I'm starting, for those who do work in a family business, we all know that it's not an easy thing to do. And Steve, started his business. He's had his children work with him. He's had his brother work with him. So he understands what it's like. And those are just some of the people that I can think of. But really, the two people who I've learned the most from in my career, and I'm not going to sit here and say that that they told me to say this, but I have two of the best people that I can have as mentors in my house right now. So I think that I definitely, having the advantage of having people two people who've been in the space for so long and who are incredibly well known and obviously very smart, in my parents has been really helpful for me in my development. And I can't, thank them enough for the opportunities they have given me. And they've also really let me be my own person too, which I
feel the same way about my parents. I've been on podcasts talking about them and both my mom and dad. And it's nice to be able to have conversations like this and to genuinely feel that way about our parents and, just count ourselves incredibly fortunate for that because a lot of people don't have that. And let's say there's some people that don't have that and their parents may not be entrepreneurial. Maybe this is their first kind of venture into entrepreneurship or as a franchisee or franchisor, or they just they weren't born into connections what advice would you have for somebody like that? Because even if you had the connections, I know a lot of people out there that have the ability to have these connections, but they don't have the capability themselves to pursue those relationships and to give and get value out of those. So what advice would you give somebody, or the advice that you gave yourself as you started to learn how to be mentored properly?
I hope you don't sleep much, I think is kind of the answer. I mean, I know that as somebody who, has the last name that I have, especially in franchising, that I have to work my butt off harder than anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to, be the last person at that bar with that client that wants to stay out and drink until 2 a.m. And I need to be the first person at breakfast the next morning, being able to greet those clients who went to sleep at 9:30 and who are going to be at that breakfast at 6:30, 7 a.m. at those conferences. That always is the way that my parents have both worked. And it's very important for me to do that and to always be the hardest working person, because I don't want people to think that I didn't earn it. I think that that's really the most important advice that I can give, is that, for instance, we'll be talking about it in a second, but a lot of what I did this summer, I think we got a Kickstarter because we got started because of, my relationships and who my family is. But I think that it took Ryan and I a ton of work to really make all of that come together. And there was a lot that was involved in it. You'll hear about it in a second. The logistics were absolutely insane. And I think that the only way that we could have gotten that done is if we, put our head down and actually really did the work, and we're honest with ourselves that, we need to basically be as annoying as possible to make sure that this actually felt that this did not fall through. Because at the end of the day, when we're young too, right, which doesn't necessarily help. There's not many people in franchising that are really young that are standing in these rooms that you and I have been blessed enough to be in. And I think that it's really important to take advantage of that and not take it for granted at the same time.
Well, let's dive into the podcast tour that you and Ryan did. I mean, you guys got a cool bus. I don't know how cool it was after being on it for forever, but I mean, that's a great idea to get around and to start interviewing a bunch of people. How many, give us, what was the genesis of that tour, and like, how many people did you actually interview?
Yeah, I mean, I can't give Ryan enough credit. I mean, Ryan Hicks, who is the VP of Business Development at Rallyo and who's become one of my very close friends, whether I like it or not at this point, because we spend so much time together now. But we, he actually came to us. It's funny, this past year in Park City. Ryan,
Oh, you're breaking up a little bit.
Can you hear me a little better now?
Yep.
So
Hey,
Ryan and I actually,
editor, we will just cut that out, just that little piece. So go ahead, Zach.
So when we got before YoungConference started on Tuesday night, there's always a little shindig going on, relatively informal. And Ryan and I were met for drinks at the bar beforehand, and he had texted me before saying, "Hey, I got an idea for you. Would you mind meeting up with me at the bar before?" And I go, "Sure." He's like, "I'll buy you a drink." I go, "Great." So go down to the bar a little early, and he's like, "Look, I've got this crazy idea, and I know that I'm always full of crazy ideas, but just hear me out. I know that you're a realist and I'm not, but just listen to me for a second and don't interrupt and just like let it happen." So he told me about this dream that he had of renting an RV bus and going around the country interviewing different people for the podcast that I had recently joined probably about 6 months prior. And I looked at him and I go, "You're like," I used expletives, but I won't use it here. I was like, "You're nuts, man. There's literally no way I'm doing that." And he said, "Well, I think you just need to give it a shot. Just think about it." I go, "Okay." And so I started thinking about it a little bit, and my life kind of began to change because I had decided that I was going to move back here probably around that time frame. So the timing kind of lined up, and I said, "Okay, I'll go for a week." And he goes, "Fine." And then he knew that he had me. As a salesperson, he just continued to upsell me until a week turned into 6. And so we did a 47-day podcast tour. We went to 26 states. We did 112 pieces of content, to be exact. I looked it up before we got on here. And we visited.
Oh, you broke up again. You visited how many?
Over 75. So definitely a pretty large amount of people. We did various pieces of content with a lot of them. We had about 14 sponsors on the tour. And the best part about it is that, our largest sponsor was franchisors.com. Now, that's what the name of the tour was called. It was the franchisors.com Summer Franchise Tour. And really, the reason we did it was to give exposure to, Springboard, to Unconference, which we met at, and Springboard, which you were just at with me. And then also the conference that Ryan and I are going to be running together in about a month called YoungConference, which we'll be talking about in a second. But, we had many other sponsors on the tour. We're talking Scorpion, FranFunnel, Franchise Help, FranFund, Clarity Voice, BDO. They're like RPM, Rob Cambruzzi's company, who you're friends with as well. Tons of people like that we had the opportunity to, there's many more that I didn't name, and I'm sorry guys for not naming them, but there were a lot of people that really put in all this work to help us, ensure that not only did we showed up at every place on time, but that we were fed. There's tons of people that, we had the opportunity to be with, but really,
Was it a lot more work than you thought?
It was a lot more work than it was actually just as much work as I thought. It was a lot more work than Ryan thought. As I said, I'm the realist. I'm the realist, and he's the ideas guy. So as it goes. But I think that it was worth it for us because we really got to grow our footprint, which I think was important. But moreover, we really got to give a lot of exposure to a lot of awesome brands and a lot of awesome people that maybe hadn't gotten it before. And we got to interview some amazing people like, Catherine Munchin and Shelly Sun, who I named earlier. We also got to do, interview people like Gordon Logan, who, is the founder of Sport Clips, which was a super awesome interview. I had never really had the chance to meet him before, but that's an interview that I had always wanted to do. And it was kind of my holy grail, and I got a chance to do it. And, we got to interview many, 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 many more people along the way, and it was
so a lot of different
really,
people
really awesome.
in a lot of different facets of franchising. Were they all franchisors, or did you interview some franchisees as well?
We actually interviewed a couple multi-unit franchisees, two of which to call out that I thought were, especially interesting. Number one, he is one of the largest franchisees in the world, Aslam Khan, out of Texas. He runs a group called Falcon Holdings. For those who kind of follow along with the large franchisee, multi-unit franchisee groups, his name is consistently at the top. He's actually a very, very big mentor to Ryan, and he is probably one of the most generous people I've ever met. He really took to Ryan because they both live in Dallas, and Aslam he was very recently the CEO of the interim CEO of TGI Fridays, because they literally just needed somebody that was super smart in transition. And so he came in, and his group still runs a ton of operational stuff for Fridays. And he started out as, I think he was a cook at a Church's Chicken. And then now he owns hundreds of them. Like in addition to many other brands that he's involved in, he just recently bought 2 franchise brands, which we visited. Piccadilly's, which is out of New Orleans, and then Fats Cafe, which is out of Charlotte. So he's doing a ton of stuff. And then in addition to that, the largest multi-unit owner of Denny's, Dawn LaFrida, who started as a waitress at a Denny's, and now she owns 90 Denny's around the country. And she is an unbelievable woman. If you've never had the chance to meet her, then both of those people are so unbelievable in their own rights. And I never really had done a whole lot in the multi-unit side of things before like that, but they both knew Ryan beforehand, and they're both amazing people. So, that was a really awesome experience to get to interview people that, made their livelihood on franchising.
What did you learn about yourselves, or even questions that you started to ask as you got better? I mean, doing that many interviews over that period of time, you had to have gotten better at asking questions and listening. And what were some of the things that you learned?
I think that Ryan and I both agreed on this, because it's funny, we were actually just talking about this. We really, really learned how to get things out of people that they didn't really anticipate talking about. Not that they were scared to, but I think it was just more that they, there was a lot of things I learned about people that I had known since I was a little kid in some of these interviews, which I think was really cool, just because of the way that we were having the questions flow. And, you do get better at it over time. And I think that you'll probably admit that you see that too. The more of these that you do, the more reps you get, the better you are at kind of figuring out, interesting things to ask people, so you can actually get the conversation flowing in a way that isn't generic. And I think that that's what I learned. I don't think Ryan and I both really ever thought that we were going to be awesome at this, but I think that a lot of people, it's weird the reception that we got, which I think was super cool, especially as being two really young guys that, had the opportunity to be in rooms with some really important people. So I think that the fact that they felt like we were holding our own, I think was a really great compliment to receive. And so I think that was something that we definitely learned, is that we should have a little bit more confidence in our abilities, and not just think that because we're young that we may be a little bit more inexperienced, that we're not. necessarily good at this stuff. So.
It's so easy to just limit ourselves, isn't it? I mean, there's so many, we have so much opportunity within us and around us, and it's just so easy. Like you said, just confidence. I think everybody kind of struggles with that to an extent, but, or maybe I'm just speaking, maybe it's just me and maybe it's just you that struggles with that. But yeah, I mean, I've seen it. The more that I step out and get confident in different things, there's just so much opportunity out there. So what question do I need to ask you that I haven't asked you yet that like would tell the world something about you that you weren't expecting?
I think that one thing that I also learned on the tour that was really interesting to me was that how happy people were to actually have somebody just go and take the time to see them in person and to actually, go to their office and spend time with them and kind of walk for a little bit in their shoes. And I think that, so many people, as somebody who's like really young, right? I mean, I'm somebody who is all for having as many young people in the franchise space as possible, but at the same time, I think I'm a little bit of a paradox, and Ryan is too, that we still like to talk on the phone, and we also and I ran a texting software for heaven's sake, but at the same time, I know that actually being in person, there's nothing like it, right? And I think that this solidified it more than anything that I've ever done before, because I got to build relationships with people, and I am so much closer to people and talk to people more than I did before. I've known for forever, but just like being there and spending time with them and going to one of their restaurants and just hanging out with them, or going to one of their gyms or sitting in their office for a little while, like that just made a world of difference. And, for all these people who are saying that conferences and going for in-persons are so 1992 and you don't need to do it anymore, there is something to be said about being in person with somebody and making that personal connection. But there's one thing I will say for people who are really young that, don't necessarily like to have that in-person interaction because we're always behind our phones all the time. I really think that there's still going to be a place for being in person with people. And because, I mean, look, I think that a lot of people who didn't know us quite as well were a little bit surprised that we were going out of our way to just go and see everybody in person, and actually could also hold the conversations. But, it's an art that should not be lost. You really should work hard to have that interpersonal, connection with people too, because it's so important.
Did you meet any younger people on that tour as well? Or were they mostly like people that have been in the business for a long time?
It was a really big mix, actually. We met with a lot of brands, some of which are actually going to be at YoungConference coming up, which we'll talk about in a bit. For instance, we spoke with the co-founder of College Hunks Hauling Junk, Omar. Omar, and also his partner, Nick, is really involved, but unfortunately wasn't able to make it. Omar is somebody who I've known for a number of years, but just being able to be in his office and to see, some of the nuances of why they pick certain colors and how they oriented the office, because there's a method to those guys' madness in such an important way. And I think that they're both incredibly sharp people. I mean, we're fortunate to have Omar, coming to YoungConference and helping us out behind the scenes a lot, which has really been great. Among a lot of other people that we also had as well. I mean, there's a new concept that we were talking to, Scissors and Scotch, which is out of Kansas
Texas.
City.
Oh, is it out of Kansas City, Texas? I was thinking our buddy JD, but they're out of Texas. JD's out of Texas.
Yeah.
Scissors and Scotch out of KC.
Yeah, exactly. So that's a brand that's doing really awesome stuff, and that's started by a bunch of guys that are all really young. Like they're like all in their late 20s, early 30s. So, I mean, that's a pretty awesome thing going on. And then, we also had, the guys from Franchise Fastlane. I mean, like Carrie and Ryan are both super young, and they've got 15, 16 brands that they're running out of their offices in Omaha that they're doing sales for, and their operation's unbelievable. I was actually just at one of our sponsors from the tour, IFPG's conference, and they were platinum sponsor.
Yeah, I saw you. I wasn't there, but I saw some pictures of you there online somewhere. But yeah, Ryan and Carrie over at Franchise Fastlane, they're fantastic people, and their company is blown up. So
right, so tons of young people for sure.
Oh yeah. So the podcast name, the podcast. I mean, if people want to go listen to that podcast, what's the name of that podcast? How do they find it?
Yeah, so it's Modrn Business without the E, so Modrn Business. And then you're going to see a picture of Ryan and myself. I'm, for some reason, on a summer tour wearing a button down with a sweater over it. That was consistently pointed out by the many people that were like, everything looks great, but like, why are you in a sweater? It was just the picture that I got sent. It was actually a surprise. Our face was on the back of the bus. Our faces were on the back of the bus, and I had no idea. Ryan just told me to send it to him, and I thought it was going to be in the thumbnail of the podcast. But sure enough, it ended up on the back of a 38-foot bus, which was great. But thanks for the surprise. But yeah, so that's where you go to find us. So Modrn Business, and you can always we're always posting on LinkedIn and on Facebook. It's Ryan Hicks and Zack Fishman on LinkedIn.
Yeah, so go check them out. Let's dive into the Young Conference. I was hoping to be able to make it. I can't. I've got some commitments in Park City myself. But like, I so appreciate what your dad and Lane Fisher have done with these other two conferences, with the Unconference and Springboard. They're fantastic for somebody like me. And it's really about building relationships. Like, I've gotten to know so many people by attending those, and built some really good relationships. As Lane was texting me this morning about some stuff. And so tell us about the Young Conference. Like, who should be going to that thing?
Yeah. So, it's for the young and it's for the young-minded, right? I think that the conference is really meant to bring together all of the folks in the franchise space who are young and maybe don't have the opportunity to go to conferences all the time, but really want to be able to network and meet people who speak their vernacular, and to really talk about topics that maybe don't get discussed at conferences all that often. So we're talking, virtual reality. We have one of our keynote speakers, Michael Browning, the CEO of Urban Air Adventure Parks. Maybe you have heard of him. A lot of folks probably have. They're really, really hot in franchising right now. He's a 34-year-old guy, and so he's going to be talking about how they use virtual reality in their business and how you could too. We have the CEO of Dippin' Dots, Doc Popcorn, Scott Fisher, somebody who I actually haven't had the pleasure of meeting quite yet, but has been a client of Fishman PR for a number of years.
Who's not a client of Fishman PR? Like, whenever I turn around, it's like, this franchisor is with Fishman PR. I'm serious. Like, it seems like everybody's a client.
We're very blessed. We have a lot of really awesome people that we work with, but I think that the good thing for this conference is that if you're somebody that really wants to learn, from somebody like Marcos Mora, who's also a fellow podcaster like you and me, and Ryan Comby from Better Way Franchise Group, who are social media advertising extraordinaires, and they're basically just going to sit there. And go around the room and have people just hold out their phones, get out their brand, LinkedIn and Facebook, and just say, let's go through how we can make this better. And they're just going to have everybody just group think their way through these different campaigns to just make everything better for people. It's very interactive, and the point really is just to get people talking, and to get people that are really young to know each other a little bit better, because there is that old guard in franchising, and Ryan and I kind of want to create the new guard. So yeah, that's really what it's all about.
And these guys are there to help. Like Marcus, I mean, what he does on LinkedIn to help people buy franchises for his own brand. And I mean, the stuff that he's helped me out over the years, I mean, he has given away a lot of really good information. He doesn't just like hold it all to himself. And Ryan's a great guy as well. And, we've had multiple conversations and seen each other at different times. And I love what he's doing with his brands, his new brands, what he's doing. They're like millennial brands. He's like selling franchises in a different way, and they're different kind of concepts. So it's really
all through cool. Instagram. So all through Instagram, which is great. And those are just some of the things that we're going to be doing. We've got a lot of really awesome speakers. We actually have, if you were at the keynote last year for Gary Vee at the IFA, he started an agency called the Sasha Group. And we are in talks right now to hopefully get the SVP of the Sasha Group to come and do a big masterclass session with us on all things consumer digital marketing, and to kind of go through all of that, which I think would be amazing, because everybody loved Gary Vee at IFA.
Oh yeah.
depending on how much you like swearing. But he
or you can
maybe
put up
some of
with
the
it.
swearing could come. Yeah, I can put up with it because I swear like a sailor most of the time. But it was just things like that are really going to be awesome. Even going down to the fact that we're doing a game show that has a little bit of drinking involved as well. So we're going to make it really, really fun, really interactive, and hopefully people will like it.
So who should be going? All franchise? Is it like the founders? Is it the development people? Is it the VPs, the presidents? Is it like someone young on the team that's getting raised up? Or are they franchisees, or someone that is in the middle of kind of looking for their next gig within franchising? Like who should be going?
Anybody that's under the age of 45 and we're not checking IDs at the door, guys, but I think it's all about the fact that, suppliers that are on the younger side that are looking to kind of network and get involved with founders and CEOs in the franchise space who are really young and innovative. And then also we're going to have a lot of folks on the franchise consultant side that are really young, in addition to a lot of directors and VPs and C-suites that are maybe not the CEO or the founder of the company, but are very much involved and visible in the franchise space. And we want all people that are involved, because there's a lot of moving parts in franchising. I think it's important to make sure that we're all talking to each other, because again, like I think that it's time to kind of build that next network of people. And we informally have it. You and I are definitely running the same circles now, but I think that not many people are lucky enough to kind of be within that stratosphere. So I think that it's just important that we become more inclusive and everybody begins to know each other a little bit more than they already.
Yeah, and I think for anybody out there that's kind of wondering, because you can go to conferences, you can go to events, and you've got the important people over here and the newbies over here, and it's just it is not like that. It won't be like that at the Young Conference. It's just a lot of these events there are like you said, you're there late at night, early in the morning. I mean, you are super relatable, and you're always just on with people. So if people want to get connected, I mean, that's going to be, and I sound like I'm pitching it, because I know these guys and I know what people can get. So the purpose of this podcast is to give people information that they may not have or may not have access to, or they may want to just get like the straight scoop, because there's a ton of conferences out there that are just a waste of time for most people, especially if you're wanting relationship build. But
I still have to be at all of them, whether I like it or not.
What's the worst one? Tell me the worst one.
Oh, I can't tell you that. I can't tell you that. My lips.
It went through your head though, right? I mean, there was like a banner that went through your head of like maybe one or two or three. I think
Oh my God.
I'm about ready to say it for you.
No, I can't do that. It's Springboard. No, I'm kidding. No. No, but yeah, I think that also conferences with Lane and my father and my mother are incredibly, incredibly different. And I think that sounds like I'm being biased, but really as little as small, there are nuances to it. For instance, the fact that the name tag has your name on both sides. So when you're walking around and it flips over, people are like, who is that guy? I can't really tell. They have your name on the name tag of both sides, just like small stuff like that, that they just like have been going to conferences for forever, and they know that that's an annoying thing. And so that's the case. And, they understand what it means to be successful at a conference, and they understand what it means to run a conference that is really accomplishing the goals people are looking for. And I think that, this conference will be no different, except it's just going to skew a little bit younger, and there may be a little bit more drinking, but that's at the end of the day. For us, we really want to drive value for people to, get some really interesting education out of it too. Right. Because I think that, this generation is the largest one in the U.S. now. Right. And I think that, how to market to them from a franchise development and consumer side, things like that are just, and learning it from people who actually are in that
doing it. They're doing it. Well, let's talk about that. Like, what do you see as changing of the guard? Because there's a bunch of people that have been, and I know a lot of them, and even more than I do. And I mean, they're mentors to us, and I can, pick up the phone and it's like, just get a download of a wealth of knowledge, but they also recognize like there's something that we have that they don't, and they're including us in a lot of things where, probably 10 years ago it wouldn't have been that way. Like, what do you see as some of the innovative things happening in franchising, some of the changing of the guard type stuff?
You know, there's a couple things, and I think that number one, the fact that people like us are doing podcasts now, and that we're trying to spread the word and spread our opinions on things, and the fact that our generation isn't afraid to do that, I think, is a very big difference. I think that we're obviously more connected than ever before, and kind of getting on and doing it in a formalized setting like a podcast is very different. I think that one of the sessions that we're actually going to be doing at Young Conference 2 is really the power of podcasting, whether that's internally or whether that's, to spread your brand's awareness of your brand, or to do on the franchise sales side or on the consumer side to get more people through the doors, things like that. Podcasting is a really new idea that, has been around for a good amount of time, but, is really starting to take its foothold in franchising. I think in addition to that, there's a lot of, I think that from a culture standpoint, especially within the millennial markets, there's a lot of really new and innovative technologies that I've seen that I think are really exciting. There's some gamification technologies to help people train a little bit more efficiently. There's some, there's some
a big thing.
Gamification's
a big thing now. Like if that's a new word to you, it will not be a new word in the future, because that is a really big thing, especially if you're, with millennials and others. Gamification, take note of that. So keep going on that.
Yeah, because I think that for me, and there's a bunch of people in the space that do it pretty well. I think that, what I find interesting about it is because when we were in school, right, when I was learning when I was a kid, most of the learning that I did was through games and through activities, right? Because gone was the age of actually learning from, somebody just speaking at you in front of a chalkboard or a whiteboard, right? It's just a very different environment that I learned under. And so they wanted to try, and I think that business is finally responding to that and understanding that, you have to make that, you have to kind of make that exist in the professional world too. And so I think that that's really why gamification is becoming really, really big, especially in the franchise space. It's finally here in the franchise space, which I think is really exciting. And, there's a lot of other things that people are doing on the operational side, but I think specifically that's what's really awesome is, some of the things that we were talking about earlier with Marcos and with Ryan, is that some of the really interesting things that people are doing on social media when it comes to ads, I'm really, really, really loving, some of the stuff that people are doing that actually they're getting edgier, because, I think that, gone are the days, hopefully, that where people are just sitting there with thumbs up in front of a truck online. I think that, Marcos and Ryan are on the forefront of really trying to eliminate that and getting people to actually be a bit more innovative and not be cookie cutter. And I think lastly, the people using influencer relations, because working for a PR firm now, that was really eye-opening to see.
That's what I was hoping you were going to go there, because that's where I was going next is influencer. And there's different kinds of influencers, types of influencers, and reach. So keep going, man. I want to hear your thoughts on influencers.
I think that, for me, it's going to become more and more a part of Fishman PR's business, and our subsidiary Franchise Elevator is doing a lot of work with it too. And I think that the reason that we're doing it is because people want to hear from these influencers because it's more measurable, it's very quantifiable to be able to see how many followers they have. I think unfortunately one thing, I don't know if you've seen in the news, but Instagram is actually going to be hiding your ability for certain people to see how many likes they've gotten on certain posts. But I think that being able to track how many people are actually liking your posts. Yeah. It's gone are the days of having to buy all these really expensive softwares to understand impressions. Mm-hmm. You have the impressions right there in the form of how many red hearts you have based off of how many people have liked it. And I think that is really measurable, especially for PR, where it's a bit hard to measure sometimes. So the future, of course, is anything that has some data behind it is obviously super important, and Instagram's no different.
Well, even in that, and this is always changing. That's why it's important to be around people like Marcus, who is at the forefront of a lot of this stuff, and things have changed for him, I'm sure, on his LinkedIn strategy. Like you said, Instagram is they're likely to do away with with some of their things that allow us to see how many people are engaging with their content. Facebook is doing something similar in different countries, I've heard. And, all of this stuff will probably end up happening here at some point. And, but I think one of the things in social media that if you're just some quick advice, if you're out there looking at having some type of influencer help you out with your like little location or group of locations, or if you're a franchisor, make sure that influencer has engagement. And I'm sure, if you have, Gary V's VP out there, he'll probably talk about this, but engagement is key. You can have a bunch of likes, you can have a bunch of followers. You can also pay for those things and they're not real, but engagement's real. And so see how many people are engaging with content out there. So I think, man, I wish I could make it. You got to let me know the date like way in advance next time so I can mark it off on my calendar. Maybe just
Trust me,
plan
we
it
wanted
a
to.
little bit more. Maybe just like plan it more than like a couple days before.
I know, right? Well, hey, if it were up to me, we won't get into that. But I think at the end of the day, I think that we really wanted to build on the success of Springboard. Springboard had about 480 people this year, which was, the largest that it's ever been. And, we did this crazy RV tour that we just talked about, and we had, and for folks who haven't seen it, if you go to franchisors.com, you can kind of check out some of the things that we did from the tour this summer. And I think that, we had Young Conference all over the side of the bus, man. And we did it all summer, and we kind of decided, you know what, we're going to do this thing. It's going to be hard as hell, but we're going to try and figure it out. And, we're chugging along, and thankfully, people like you are giving us a platform to talk about it and scream from the mountaintops about it. And,
and that's what we do. When there's something to do, it's like either you delay and lose momentum or whatever it is, or you just go for it. And, that's the difference with people that actually just take action on stuff. And not everything, is going to be a massive success. Even in franchising, so many people think like you just buy the franchise and it's magically successful without any of your effort. We're entrepreneurs. You were raised in it. And that's what we do. And that's the difference between, I think the people that are super successful in this industry and those with not as much success is you've got to make a decision and take action and do the best that you can and let chips fall where they fall. Right.
I agree. Yeah, I think that that's definitely important. And, for folks who want to learn more about it, it's franchise YoungConference.com. So franchiseyoungconference.com. And, it's definitely pretty affordable because we understand a lot of the people are on the younger side. And it's, as Eric said, it is coming up pretty soon. The room block is closing on Monday. So, it is at the Confidant in Miami Beach, and that's November 4th and 5th.
Yeah, everybody wants to reach out to me directly too. I can always make an introduction. So, well, man, thanks for coming on. And next time I see you will probably be Park City. You going to get there a little early so we can ski?
As always, man. I'm thankfully we've spent a lot of time out there over the years, so we've got some roots. So I'm definitely going to get out there as early as I can because it's one of my favorite places in the world. So I'm already looking forward to it.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, man.
Hey, I really appreciate it, and looking forward to seeing you soon, man. Thanks.